Jesus' journey didn't begin in a palace, nor in front of crowds eager for miracles. It began with silence, with solitude, with thirst and scorching heat. After being baptized in the Jordan River, Jesus was led by the Spirit into the Judean desert. A divine choice that, at first glance, seems contradictory. After all, why would such a defining moment as the beginning of the Messiah's ministry start with isolation? In biblical tradition, the desert is never just a physical place. It's a symbol of transition, of testing, of preparation. There, where there is no shade or shelter, where the soul is stripped of the noise of the world, great transformations occur. It was there that the people of Israel wandered for 40 years. It was there that Moses heard God in the burning bush. And now, it would also be there that Jesus would face his first great battle. The Judean desert offered no mercy. The landscape was hostile, dry hills, sharp stones, cutting winds, and a sun that punished without pity. No sign of life, no sound. Only his own body, tired and hungry, as his only companion. Jesus stayed there for 40 days and 40 nights. Fasting. Praying. In complete silence. He didn't just give up physical food, he gave up every possible distraction. It wasn't just abstinence, it was consecration. A spiritual preparation for what was to come. Now try to imagine his physical condition at that point. The fatigue, the hunger, the mental exhaustion. A weak body, dry sweat on his skin. And it is in this exact state that the enemy's presence manifests. Not on the first day, nor the 10th, but at the end. When the body's defenses are at their limit. When anyone would give in. That's when the tempter stepped onto the scene. But before we talk about who appeared, it's important to understand who was already there, the beloved Son of God. The one who had just heard from the Father himself, at his baptism, "You are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." That identity was clear, publicly affirmed, and spiritually confirmed. But now it would be put to the test, not before men, but before the very darkness. The tempter didn't come with violence. He came with words. And, interestingly, with words that sounded right. With questions that stir identity. With offers that, at first glance, even seemed logical. After all, what's the harm in turning a stone into bread when you're hungry? Why not take the shortcut, win the world more quickly, if the final destination is the throne? But Jesus was not deceived. Because even though his body was weak, his spirit was strong. This moment reveals something fundamental. Spiritual strength does not come from the absence of problems, but from intimacy with the Father. Jesus didn't confront the tempter with shouting, with miracles, or supernatural displays. He confronted him with the Word. With faith. With awareness of his purpose. And here begins the great turning point of this story. Because the desert, which seemed like a place of vulnerability, transforms into a battlefield of victory. It's in the place of weakness that Jesus shows his greatest strength. And what seemed like a delay in God's plan is revealed as a vital part of the mission. Now think with me, how many times have you felt like Jesus in that desert? Weak. Exhausted. Directionless. And precisely in those moments come the most dangerous thoughts, the most seductive offers, the most persistent doubts. That's not a coincidence. The enemy waits for weakness to strike. He observes, he calculates, and when he sees that you're about to give in, he draws near. But this story teaches us that even in those moments, it's possible to resist. Because it's not about having physical strength, it's about knowing who you are in God. When Jesus was tempted, he didn't doubt the identity that the Father had affirmed. He didn't trade his mission for momentary comfort. And that's exactly what the enemy tries to do with us: steal our conviction, trade our promise for something immediate and shallow. The first step of temptation isn't sin. It's doubt. If you are the Son of God, that was the tempter's opening line. And it's still the same strategy today. If God really loves you, if you were strong enough, if this were from God, why would it be so hard? Jesus replied, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." A response that not only rejects the offer but reaffirms the foundation of his faith: trust in the Word. And here lies the most precious lesson of this first chapter: the desert is not the end. It is the beginning. It's the place where foundations are tested, where faith is refined, where all voices fall silent, and only truth remains. Jesus came out of the desert ready to transform the world. But first, he had to win in silence. In secret. In the battle no one saw. In the middle of the desert, when hunger spoke louder than anything else, Jesus was no longer alone. Someone was approaching. But it wasn't a traveler, nor a mirage caused by exhaustion. It was a real presence, conscious, and extremely dangerous. The Bible calls him the tempter. In other passages, he's called Satan, the adversary. But the issue here isn't just the name, it's the nature of this being. Because to tempt the very Son of God, it wouldn't be just any demon. It wouldn't be just any creature of the shadows. It was someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Most people grow up imagining Satan with horns, a pitchfork, and an evil laugh. But that folkloric image is far from what the Bible describes. In fact, Scripture portrays something much subtler, and for that very reason, more dangerous. This tempter knew the Word. He quoted verses. He reasoned logically. He didn't come with threats, but with offers. And that's the most delicate point. The most effective temptation doesn't look like an attack, it looks like an attractive proposal. Many scholars believe that the one who appeared there wasn't simply Satan as a generic figure of evil, but Lucifer, the fallen angel. The one who once stood before the throne of God, clothed in light, wisdom, and glory. Isaiah, chapter 14, and Ezekiel, chapter 28, speak of this exalted being who desired to be like God and was therefore cast out of heaven. And here is divine irony: the one who was expelled for trying to exalt himself above God now finds the Son of God in his most humble form. Weak, hungry, alone. And he thinks he can convince him to follow the same path of downfall. Lucifer knew heaven. He knew glory. He understood how obedience worked. And for that very reason, his weapons were refined. He didn't come with outright lies. He came with distortions of the truth. And that's even more dangerous. In the first temptation, he suggests that Jesus turned stones into bread. But before that, he plants a seed of doubt. If you are the Son of God, notice the method: question identity before proposing action. That still happens to us today. How many times, before giving into a temptation, does an inner voice question who you are? Whether you're truly saved. Whether God is really with you. Whether it's worth obeying. Lucifer's strategy hasn't changed over time. He tries to undermine the identity of the Son of God, because he knew that if Jesus doubted who he was, everything else would fall apart. But Jesus responds firmly: "It is written," and here, another layer is revealed. Lucifer wasn't just trying to provoke an action, he was trying to create a disconnection. He wanted Jesus to act outside the will of the Father. A quick fix, seemingly harmless, but spiritually destructive. And if you stop to think, isn't that exactly how he works today? He doesn't always lead us directly into sin. First, he lures us with something that seems good. A shortcut. A way out. A reasonable logic. But that gradually pulls us away from dependence on God. In the second temptation, the tempter takes Jesus to a high mountain and shows him all the kingdoms of the world. All this I will give you, if you bow down and worship me. Here he reveals himself. No longer disguised, but direct. He wants worship. This is the essence of Lucifer's rebellion. He always wanted what belonged to God. Being in heaven wasn't enough, he wanted the throne. And now, he offers Jesus the kingdoms of the earth in exchange for what, to him, is the highest prize, to be worshipped. But there's a glaring detail here. The kingdoms he offers aren't his. He tries to negotiate with what he doesn't own. He promises glory and dominion but offers spiritual bondage. It's the old trick of appearances. He promises everything, but delivers emptiness. And how many people today trade their peace, their faith, their dignity for a little bit of status, fame, power? What Lucifer offered to Jesus, he continues to offer people every day. And many are still saying yes, without realizing they're selling their soul in installments. But Jesus is not impressed. He replies, "Worship the Lord your God, and serve him only." That's the second victory. Once again, the word is used as a sword. There's no negotiation. No discussion. There is clarity. Then comes the third attempt. Lucifer takes Jesus to the highest point of the temple in Jerusalem. And now he uses a new tactic, the Bible itself. He quotes Psalm 91, "It is written that the angels will guard you." Here, the game shifts. The tempter realizes that Jesus relies on Scripture, so he decides to use that against him. But he twists its meaning. He uses the text out of context. A classic trap. How many times do ill-intentioned people use the Bible to justify wrongdoing? To manipulate? To legitimize abuse? Jesus sees the trap and responds, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." He not only counters with another verse but shows that discernment is essential. It's not enough to know the Bible. You must understand the spirit behind the word. After that, the tempter falls silent. He can't go further. And the Bible says he withdrew, for a time. In other words, he stepped back, but didn't give up. What this part of the story reveals is that temptation isn't an occasional attack, it's a continuous strategy. And the enemy we face is intelligent, calculating, experienced. But he is not invincible. Jesus showed us the way. Not with displays of power, but with spiritual firmness. With a clear sense of identity. With mastery of the Word. With complete trust in the Father. And maybe this is the big question this chapter leaves us with. Do you know the truth well enough not to fall for the appearance of a lie? The temptations of Jesus in the desert were not random. Each proposal made by the tempter was planned, calculated, and launched at just the right moment, with carefully chosen words. It wasn't a brute attack. It was a conversation. An argument. An attempt to negotiate the divine purpose through smart solutions. And that's why this story remains so relevant, because evil rarely presents itself as something grotesque. Most of the time, it comes disguised as logic. Let's take a closer look at these three proposals. The first was simple, direct, and highly effective for most people. If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. Jesus had gone 40 days without eating. Physically exhausted. Hunger was not a metaphor, it was a real cry. And the tempter knew it. But before suggesting the miracle, he planted the doubt. "If you are the Son of God," that phrase carries more than just a challenge. It aims to shake conviction. It tries to make Jesus prove who he is. The temptation here is not just about satisfying hunger, but about using his power selfishly, out of time, out of the Father's will. And that is exactly how the enemy acts today. He doesn't just want us to solve a problem, but to solve it our way, by our own strength, without waiting on God. Jesus' response dismantles the trap. "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." In other words, true sustenance doesn't come from what relieves the body, but from what strengthens the soul. How many times, under the pressures of life, are we tempted to take shortcuts? To handle things on our own? To do it our way just to get immediate relief? That's the hunger of the soul. And Jesus shows us that it's not worth trading fellowship with God for quick fixes. In the second temptation, the tempter raises the stakes. He takes Jesus to a high mountain and shows him all the kingdoms of the world, with their glory, wealth, and power. And he says, "All this I will give you, if you bow down and worship me." Now the subject is no longer hunger. It's ambition. The desire for dominion, for success, for conquest. But again, there's a lie hidden in the offer. The tempter is offering something that isn't his. He promises the world but has no legitimate authority over it. This is one of the most dangerous temptations because it's based on something many people long for: to be recognized, to be successful, to have control. And, apparently, without needing to go through the suffering of the cross. But Jesus knew that worship is not up for negotiation. He replied, "Worship the Lord your God and serve him only." That answer is not just firm, it's a declaration of unconditional loyalty. Because the temptation of power isn't just about rising quickly, but about forgetting who lifted you. It's about giving your heart to what dazzles, without realizing the spiritual price you'll pay. Today, how many people have sold their faith for status? For a career? For a relationship that seems promising, but destroys from within? The enemy continues offering kingdoms, but what he actually delivers are chains. In the third temptation, the scene shifts again. The tempter takes Jesus to the highest point of the temple and, with an almost religious tone, says, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands." Now he quotes the Bible. He uses Psalm 91. He tries to manipulate the sacred text itself to lure Jesus into a spiritual display. Here, the temptation is not material, it's religious. It's the vanity of wanting to show you're special. It's the pride of wanting to prove your faith. Jesus, once again, doesn't fall for it. He says, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." And this teaches us something profound. True faith doesn't need spectacles. It doesn't need proof. It doesn't need to challenge God to know he is present. True spirituality is expressed in quiet trust, not in risky leaps waiting for a miracle. This temptation still lives today. People who want to test God. Who demand signs, miracles, immediate answers, as if the relationship with the Father were a trade. But faith is not bargaining. It's trust. At the end of the three proposals, the tempter steps away. He has no more arguments. Jesus did not give in to any of the areas that usually bring humanity down: the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life. These three temptations, in fact, mirror exactly what happened in Eden with Eve. She saw that the fruit was good for food, desire of the flesh, pleasing to the eye, desire of the eyes, and desirable for gaining wisdom, pride of life. The same pattern, repeated. But this time, with a different ending. Jesus won. Because he was rooted in the Word. Because he knew who he was. Because he trusted the Father's plan, even though the path was the hardest one. And maybe this is the great reflection this chapter leaves us with. How many times have you chosen shortcuts, not realizing that you're trading something eternal for temporary relief? Jesus showed that it's possible to say no. That it's possible to resist. And that true strength lies in knowing the truth, and not letting go of it, even when the desert feels unbearable. Not every desert has sand. And not every temptation looks like evil. Sometimes, what shakes us most is not major tragedies, but the moments when everything feels too quiet. When the phone doesn't ring. When God's answer doesn't come. When the soul is tired and the heart restless. That's when the battle begins, and almost no one sees it. The story of Jesus' temptation in the desert clearly reveals that the greatest battlefield of spiritual warfare isn't external. It's internal. Because the hunger, the heat, and the isolation were only the setting. The real struggle happened in thought, in identity, in obedience. And that's exactly how it happens with us. Maybe you're going through a desert right now. And like Jesus, you feel weakened. No strength to go on, no clear direction, no support. Temptation, in these moments, doesn't come shouting. It whispers. It comes disguised as good ideas, plausible alternatives, acceptable shortcuts. And the most dangerous part? It adapts to our weakness. If your pain is rejection, the temptation may come as cheap approval. If your struggle is loneliness, it might appear as a toxic but comforting companionship. If your weakness is impatience, it disguises itself as opportunity. The enemy is in no rush. He watches. He waits. And he knows our patterns. That's why this story isn't just about Jesus. It's about us. Because if even the Son of God was tempted while vulnerable, what makes us think we're exempt? But there is one essential difference. Jesus was physically weak, but spiritually strong. And that's where the key to victory lies. The strength that sustains us in the desert doesn't come from the absence of struggle, but from the presence of the Word. Jesus responded to the tempter with verses. Not as magic spells, but as declarations of faith. He didn't debate. He declared. This shows that knowing the Word goes far beyond memorization. It must be alive in the heart. Today, we live in a world where the desert isn't geographical, it's emotional, spiritual, social. People surrounded by technology, yet emotionally isolated. Hearts full of information, but empty of direction. Superficial relationships, weak in faith, decisions made based on anxiety instead of conviction. In this context, temptation has taken on new faces. And maybe that's what's most frightening. It doesn't frighten. It seduces. It pleases. It disguises itself as freedom, autonomy, being yourself. But deep down, it carries the same old poison, to distance humanity from God, one step at a time. The invisible struggle we face today is against this subtle distancing. And just like with Jesus, it usually happens far from the world's eyes. No one sees when you're fighting to keep your faith. When you choose not to respond to an offense. When you forgive in silence. When you deny yourself something you deeply want because you know it's not what God wants for you. These are victories no one applauds, but heaven recognizes. And what this story shows us is that Jesus' victory in the desert wasn't just his, it was ours too. Because in that confrontation, he wasn't just defending himself. He was showing us the way. And here's an important point, being tempted is not a sin. Jesus was tempted. Temptation, in itself, is part of the journey. What defines our path is the response. It's what we do with the thought that comes, with the proposal that arises, with the opportunity that seems good but comes at the wrong time. The word says in Hebrews, chapter 4, verse 15, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin." Jesus knows what it's like to fight temptation. He understands the pressure. He knows the feeling of weakness. That's why he's not a distant savior. He's a close example. Someone who's already been through what you're going through, and overcame it. Maybe today you're asking yourself, why does God allow me to go through this? The answer may not be simple. But looking at this story, one thing becomes clear: the desert was never a waste of time. It was part of the plan. Before multiplying bread, Jesus felt hunger. Before healing the sick, he was alone. Before raising the dead, he faced the shadow of the enemy. The desert didn't delay the mission. It strengthened the mission. And it's no different with us. God allows the desert, not to destroy us, but to prepare us. Because before we conquer the world out there, we need to conquer the enemy within. This chapter reminds us that the struggle is silent, but real. And so is the victory. It's not about winning in the eyes of the world. It's about remaining standing when everything around you invites you to fall. And here's the question: when no one is watching, what has been guiding your choices, the will of the Father or the hunger of your soul? When the final temptation ended, the desert remained silent. The tempter withdrew. The invisible battle had come to an end. And then something extraordinary happened. The angels came to Jesus. They served him. Brought food, comfort, presence. There were no trumpets. No applause. But there was victory. Jesus didn't just resist, he overcame. And he overcame in the most powerful way, remaining faithful when no one was watching. Unlike Adam, who fell in a garden surrounded by abundance, Jesus triumphed in the desert surrounded by scarcity. And that victory marked the true beginning of his ministry. From that moment on, Jesus left the desert with more than renewed strength. He came out with proven spiritual authority. It was after that moment that he began preaching, healing, delivering. But before all that came the silence. The hunger. The confrontation. The resistance. It's as if God were saying, before transforming the world, you must overcome what tries to transform you. And here lies one of the most powerful lessons in this entire story: the desert is not a punishment. It's a laboratory. A place where God reveals who we are and prepares us for what he wants to do through us. The desert is not the end of the journey, it's the bridge between the promise and its fulfillment. Many want to live the miracles of Jesus, but few are willing to endure the silence of the desert. Many want authority but avoid discipline. They want purpose but resist the process. And yet, it was precisely this process that shaped Jesus' character as a man before God and before others. It's important to remember, the tempter left, but he didn't give up. Luke, chapter 4, verse 13, says the devil departed until an opportune time. In other words, he would wait for another chance. This applies to us as well. Temptation may cease for a time, but it returns. And that's why we must remain constantly strengthened. But how do we do that? Jesus gave us the key. He knew the Word. He trusted the Father. He knew who he was. These three pillars sustained his victory. And they can sustain ours too. Knowing the Word goes beyond memorizing verses. It's letting it shape the way we think. Trusting the Father goes beyond saying we believe. It's depending on him even when everything seems against us. And knowing who you are, that may be the hardest part. Because the enemy will always try to make us forget. But those who walk with God have a firmly established identity. Today, the desert you face may be different from Jesus. It might be an illness, a family problem, an internal crisis, a loneliness no one sees. But if this story teaches us anything, it's that God never wastes a desert. If He allowed Jesus to go through it before beginning His mission, then maybe what you're facing now is also part of your preparation. You may not understand everything right now. It may seem hard, unfair, senseless. But remember, the desert is not where God abandons you, it's where He prepares you for something greater. And when that preparation ends, something new begins. After the desert, Jesus impacted the world. And maybe, after yours, you too are about to impact lives, transform situations, and live out what God has already dreamed for you. So the question remains, are you willing to leave the desert with more faith than you had when you entered? The desert wasn't the end, it was the beginning. When Jesus came out of it, He was no longer just the carpenter's son. He was the Messiah, ready for the mission. He had faced the enemy head-on. And He had won. Not with physical strength. Not with human influence. But with truth. With faith. With obedience. This story still speaks to us today because, deep down, we all face deserts. Some shorter, others longer. Some silent, others screaming. But they all have one thing in common. They reveal who we really are and what we're standing on. Maybe you're in that exact place right now. Maybe you're dealing with disguised temptations, pressures no one sees, thoughts trying to pull you away from your purpose. And temptation doesn't come the way you expect. It doesn't shout. It whispers. But today, this story reminds you that you're not alone. The very Son of God went through the desert. He felt hunger. He felt weak. He was attacked. But He overcame. And He overcame to show you that it's possible to overcome too. It doesn't matter if the world says you're not enough. If the enemy is trying to convince you that the shortcut is easier. Or if the voices around you are pushing you away from God. The truth is, if the Word is alive within you, you'll have a ready answer. And more than that, you'll have the strength to keep standing. Jesus didn't need to prove anything to the world. He just had to remain firm in what the Father had already said. You are my beloved Son. And you? What has God already declared about you that you need to start believing again? You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be grounded. Because when temptations come, and they will, your victory won't be in your strength, but in your faith. So here's a practical challenge for you. Set aside 5 minutes a day, for 7 days, to meditate on a single verse that strengthens your identity in God. Don't just read it, declare it. Out loud. In front of your doubts. In front of your struggles. And if possible, write down what God speaks to you during that time. This simple habit can help you do exactly what Jesus did in the desert, resist with truth. Because those who are nourished by the Word have strength to resist the enemy's offers. And if this message spoke to you, share it with someone who's facing a desert right now. You might be the answer from God to strengthen someone who's about to give up. After all, every great mission begins with a firm decision made in the place where no one is watching. And it's in that silence that God forms the strong. If this message spoke to you in any way, take a deep breath and remember, the desert may feel like the end, but in God's hands, it's always the beginning of something greater. Now tell me in the comments, what was the hardest moment in your desert? Or, if you've already made it through a phase like that, share how God sustained you. Your testimony might be exactly what someone here needs to read today. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and subscribe now. Every week here, we bring real stories from the Bible with messages that strengthen your faith and help you keep walking strong, even on hard days. Oh, and hit the like button if this content helped build your faith. That helps YouTube show this video to more people who are also going through battles and need to hear this word. And for those of you who want to understand more about the origin of evil, and how this same enemy tried to destroy humanity before the flood, with a story that many religious leaders prefer not to tell, I invite you to watch the video that's linked in the description and also in the card. It's dark. It's revealing. And it will make you see the Bible through new eyes. Click there and join me on this journey of faith and truth.